our ability to talk to literally anyone is a skill set. Like,
totally.
Like, it's a kind of a cool.
One of comedy's biggest victims, Hasan Minhaj, was recently on the We Might Be Drunk podcast to promote his latest Netflix special, and he didn't come across very well, as we'll see from looking at the comments. There were a few times he just didn't seem to get Mark and Sam's humor, or he would try to make a point which put himself in a good light. Now, to be fair to him, he's had a rough career. He's had some traumatic events in recent years, which turned out to be false, but in his defense, his emotions is where the real trauma came from. I know it sounds confusing, but we'll get to that as well. Then there was an article exposing the false stories he told, and that likely traumatized him again, so I'll try and go easy on him. Now, I saw this a few weeks ago, and I figured I had to cover it. There's been a lot of critique of comedians, especially these past couple of years. One of the biggest reasons for that is their egos getting out of control. The huge rise in popularity for stand-up is great, but there's been this side effect of some comics letting the hype go to their heads. For instance, there's been this notion that comedians are special. They're different to the average human because they're funny, they can write good jokes, and deliver it really well in front of a crowd. Some comedians feel that this art genuinely separates them from the rest of society.
There's maybe 500 of us on the planet. You know, you got to be real generous and say 500 because it's really probably about 250. You think about the billions and billions of people on the planet, there's a little smidgen of us.
And it looks like Hasan Minhaj has the same mindset as Rogan. During this podcast, he said a couple of things that embodies everything wrong with the modern day egocentric comedian. And that is implying that comics are indeed unique. He does it first in this clip. Sam is explaining that even though he's a comedian, he can be surprisingly boring in his everyday life. But then Hasan contradicts that and goes on to make a point of how talented comedians really are because they have this special ability to talk to anyone.
I was like deciding whether or not to get an umbrella, and I was like, I'm just not really an umbrella guy.
Yeah.
And she's looking at me like, I don't care. Like, but I'm like, explaining, I do need one, but I was like, but I'm never going to use it.
You become Biden at the register.
She just watched it all, and I was like, I am fucking awful.
Yeah.
But in our defense, though, do you ever have to, when you go to like a party with your ladies' work friends?
Yes.
And you're like, bro, there are fucking just goobers out here.
Oh,
yeah, just office banter.
They're
like,
listening to this like, I thought we connected.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Dude, I go to so many, who cares? I go to so many like work events with my wife because she, you know, she's got her career and she's doing her thing, and you got to go to the Christmas party, you got to go to the whatever, and like they'll find out you're a comic. They'll go, you know, I was in a band, right? You know, it's in a band. Yeah, and you're like, yeah, sure. Yeah. You're like, cool, man, cool.
What do you play? You got to keep it going a little bit.
Yeah, and you just So at least with us, when we're at like when you're having the conversation with the bodega, like our ability to talk to literally anyone is a skill set. Like
totally.
Like it's a kind of a cool.
I don't think she was like, man, this guy's really social.
No, you don't think so?
In that
But
moment.
in your defense, all we do is like
man.
Trump jokes. We got the Gaza shit. Like all we do is ingest all this dark shit and real shit and serious shit that it's nice to go, this umbrella is a little too thick for me. This one's lighter though. That's nice to go minutia every now and then.
Yeah.
It was nice to see Sam keep it real and disagree with Hasan's statement. And even Mark agrees with Sam and basically says, you know, it's nice to talk trivial stuff now and then. But hey, even though Hasan was being a little insufferable, at least he didn't refer to non-comedians as civilians.
I don't participate in the comment section because it's weird because you'll have like civilians in the comment. I'm not going to come in with the blue check.
Okay, so I guess we can't be surprised, right? In case you didn't know, the term civilian or pedestrian have recently been used by the cringiest of comedians to describe people who aren't one of the rare species of 250 comedians on this planet.
It's so funny. A comic's brain is so different than a pedestrian's brain. And like what, you know, like I can't help. I went
Pedestrian is so funny, by the way.
Oh.
Like saying that. It's better than civilian.
Yeah.
That drives me crazy. It's like, we're not in the fucking armed force. Let's fucking relax.
There's a lot of people that
So after Mark and Sam push back on Hasan's ridiculous point about the special ability comedians have with being able to talk to anyone, in this next spot, he not only refers to regular folks as civilians, but then starts to give credit to Sam for understanding where he was going with his joke. As if to say that wouldn't be possible if he wasn't one of the rare breed of human, also known as a comedian.
So the whole thing is they're like, my first grader needs to have a cell phone in the event that there's a school shooter. Like I need to, And there's every part of me that wants to do like the bit, and I'm like, I can't.
Right.
You know,
Right.
like
What's
you
your
can't.
cell phone doing in the school shooting?
Sam,
guess what?
you're reading the passing lane.
People are gonna hear.
Bro, you're Iverson reading the passing lane. You're in the pass. I get it. I so want to do that.
Yeah.
On God.
You know how AI was so good at
Straight
that?
up.
He could, yeah.
There's a guy with a gun. Hold on a second. Police?
Let me go
I
live.
heard about it. Yeah.
We don't get enough credit for that too as comics of like, hey, we can read the passing lane. Like
Right.
the way you saw it, you anticipate it. You're like, pass, fast break. But there's certain convos where they're not willing to engage with that.
Yeah, no, of course not.
Mark and Sam are pretty self-deprecating, which is typical of a lot of comedians who don't buy too much into their own hype. And, you know, it helps to make them relatable to their audience, but that's clearly not the thought process of Hasan. They started this point of the conversation by saying how boring they can be in everyday life, despite being a successful comic. But Hasan flips it into a session where he praises comedians, including himself, for their sense of humor. It was hard to find a positive comment about Hasan. The negative ones really stood out. This guy blows. This guy is a douche. Podcast ends at 42:33, which is when Hasan joins the episode. Rough guest, guy sucks in each and every aspect. Still watching for the boys. And then of course we had some comments which referenced the infamous New Yorker article from over a year ago. I'm glad he and his baby survived the anthrax. Never thought they'd have Pinocchio on. Jussie Smollett looks a little different these days. Now some of those might look a little confusing if you don't know the full story. So in this article, he was basically called out for juicing up his stories in his comedy material. A lot of comedians and of course his fans came out in his defense saying, you know, this is completely normal. And to be fair, most comedians spice up their stories, but it's clearly for comedic effect. However, Hasan's reason looks like it was more for dramatic effect and making himself out to be more of a victim than he was, which actually helped raise his public profile. So of course a lot of fans were upset. For example, the anthrax story, which he first claimed he received fake anthrax in the mail. When he opened the letter, the fake anthrax fell on his daughter, and so they had to rush her to the hospital because they thought it was real anthrax. But here he is saying what actually happened.
My last special, I talk about how I received a letter in the mail, and when I opened the letter, white powder fell on my daughter, and we had to take her to the hospital only to find out it was not real anthrax. This, as you know, is not how it went down. And let me just say, I am sorry for embellishing the story, or if anyone was worrying about me and my family, I apologize. A letter with white powder was sent to my apartment in February of 2019. I opened it in the kitchen, powder fell on the table, and my daughter was just a few feet away. After 10 seconds of freaking out, I realized it was not anthrax and that someone was fucking with me.
He does a good job of trying to explain himself, but at the end of the day, he used his daughter as a prop to extract more sympathy from the story. It didn't make it funnier, but he gave the excuse of, even though it wasn't real, it was his emotional truth, which is a cozy way of saying that it wasn't true. And even though he got a lot of support from his peers like Whoopi Goldberg, most real comedy fans could tell the difference between spicing up a story for comedy and Hasan's emotional truths. I usually don't give Schultz and the knee slappers much credit, but with this, I gotta say, they were one of the few comedians calling this out at the time.
So we changed these things to make parts of the joke funnier.
Yes.
It's a completely different thing. It's Jussie Smollett when you are lying about victimization.
Yeah.
So I don't like it when people are starting to target other comics who have things that aren't exactly true in their
Also,
stories. This is not comedy. He's not lying about the funny part.
Yeah.
If he was, like if he found a way to the anthraxing the daughter thing is crazy.
Maybe Hasan's history with his emotional truths exposed him for the type of guy he really is, which is not authentic. And maybe that's the reason he came across so unlikable in this episode, especially sitting next to two comics who are pretty down to earth. If you enjoyed this, hit the like and subscribe and let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.